We often talk about our sinful nature, but according to Scripture, sinfulness is far from the most true thing about us. At our core, we are good. In fact, God says we are Tov Ma'od, very good. This is our definition, our design. We all know what it feels like to live out of our core. Call it in the zone, call it a flow state. It's the very best of us. Calm, centered, connected, curious, creative, courageous, compassionate. How do we live out of the core self more often? Let's dive in. Painful experiences in life inevitably crop up, and these create feelings that feel threatening to the core self. At a young age especially, we aren't sure what to do with things like bitterness, resentment, rage, inadequacy, fear, rejection, regret, guilt, and shame. We want to run from these sharp feelings. We are afraid they might overwhelm us. So we learn to manage our emotion. We make silent promises. I'll never be caught off guard and exposed again. We develop a grid of seemingly spiritual or mature responses, training ourselves to sound impressive and unbothered. I've outgrown big emotion. We settle for safe, intellectualized relationships. I interact to exchange facts. Eventually, we convince ourselves that we are self-sufficient. I'm organized and in control. Managing emotions enables us to function in our world. But our exiled parts remain wounded and unheard beneath the surface. Sometimes the emotion is too big to manage. The cabinets and closets of pain start to spill out onto the floor. Maybe you start to feel stressed, like you are living to run around and put out fires. When our internal managers reach a point of exhaustion, we devolve into a state of reaction and protection. For many, this looks like addiction, numbing, binging, hiding, sarcasm, and withdrawal. Naturally, these actions leave us feeling young, tender, and isolated, slinging us into a cycle of panicked effort again. Maybe you've been living out of such a cycle, maybe even for months or years. After a while, the core self can feel like a distant memory, and it may even be hard to sit still. How do we increase the core self and heal? The answer is a plot twist. For people of faith particularly, it's counterintuitive. We cannot, unfortunately, just be more calm or curious or compassionate. Some try to white-knuckle it, and unfortunately, those around them end up receiving something more like anxious positivity than true deep compassion. We cannot utilize the core self to impact others until we bring it to bear on our own exiles. This is the grand surprise. We cannot do for others what we have yet to do for ourselves. Maybe you've spent a lot of time resenting young and insecure parts of yourself. What would it be like to bless these parts instead of cursing them? Perhaps they desired something good. Perhaps they were damaged because of that desire. Listen to these parts with curiosity and calm acceptance. Give love to these most hated pieces of you. For all the cliche talk about self-love, you may come to find out that there is something here for you, something utterly necessary. Self-love is not an end in and of itself. No one wants their tombstone to read, "Here lies Nathan, who really loved himself." But self-love turns out to be a critical step on the journey toward greater love for others. What we are talking about here is swelling our very capacity for giving and receiving love, tapping into the core self each day and laying down the pride required to grade yourself more harshly than God does. You are beloved, inner child notwithstanding.